My name is Sarah, and I'm 35 years old. My entire life, my parents told me I was a good daughter. But that all changed the day they looked at my best friend, my dog Max, and told me he was a mistake. They thought they were teaching me a lesson about what's right and wrong. They thought they were giving me a clear picture of what a good life should look like. But they had no idea that they were about to learn a lesson of their own. A lesson that would cost them everything. If you're watching this, drop a comment below and let me know where you're from. And if this story hits home, hit the like button and subscribe. You won't want to miss what happens next. The story of Max, my dog. For as long as I can remember, I felt like I was the other child. My sister, Jessica, was the golden one. She was the one who got good grades without even trying. She was the one who married a successful doctor and had a perfect, purebred Pomeranian dog named Sparky that my parents loved. My parents always said Jessica had a classy life, and they would always tell me to be more like her. My life, on the other hand, was always a little messy. A few years ago, I was going through a really tough time. My relationship had ended, I had lost my job, and I felt completely alone. One day, I was driving home and I saw a small, dirty dog huddled on the side of the road. He was just a stray, but there was something in his eyes that made me stop. He was scared, but not broken. I took him home, gave him a bath, and named him Max. Max wasn't a perfect dog. His fur was a mix of brown and black, and he was bigger than I thought he'd be. He wasn't a purebred like Sparky, but he was smart, loyal, and had the kindest eyes I'd ever seen. He quickly became my best friend. He would greet me at the door every day, and he would lie beside me when I was sad. He didn't care about my job or my relationships. He just loved me for who I was. He was my family. My parents, however, hated him. They would visit my apartment and look at him with disgust. "Sarah," my mom would say, "that dog is a mistake. He's dirty, he's a stray, and he has no manners. Why don't you get a proper dog, like Jessica Sparky? Sparky is a champion." My dad would always add, "He's just a mutt. You need to get rid of him and focus on your life. A real dog would bring you some class." Their words felt like knives. They weren't just criticizing Max, they were criticizing me. The last few months were particularly hard. My parents had been pressuring me to sell my apartment and move closer to them. They said they wanted to see me more often, but I knew the real reason was that they wanted to control me. I kept refusing, and the tension between us grew. The betrayal. Last Tuesday, my mom called me. Her voice was sweeter than usual, and she invited me out to dinner. "Just the three of us," she said. Like old times. I was surprised, but hopeful. Maybe they were finally ready to talk things out. I agreed, and my dad came to pick me up. As I was getting my coat, I saw my mom giving Max a weird look. She had a bag of dog treats in her hand, but she had never given Max a treat before. It was strange, but I was so happy about the dinner that I didn't think much of it. That night at the restaurant, my parents were a little distant, but they seemed happy. They talked about Jessica's new car and her husband's promotion. For a moment, I forgot all about the arguments we had and I felt a sense of peace. I thought they were finally accepting me for who I was. But when I got back home, my world fell apart. My apartment was quiet. Too quiet. Max wasn't there to greet me at the door. I called his name, but there was no sound. I looked everywhere. In the bedroom, under the table, in the kitchen. He was gone. My heart was beating in my ears. I called my mom immediately. "Mom," I said, "Max is gone. Did you see him run out when we left?" There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then my mom said, "Sarah, honey, we did it for you. Your father and I took him to the shelter. He was a mistake, and you needed to get rid of him. We told them he was a stray that we found, so they won't know he's yours. It's for the best." I was so shocked I couldn't speak. I heard my dad in the background. "Don't worry," he said with a laugh. "We'll get you a Real dog, a nice purebred, like Jessica's." My parents' cruelty felt like a physical blow. They had betrayed me, not for money or property, but for a twisted idea of what a family should be. They had stolen my only source of joy and love. I cried all night, but as the sun came up, my sadness turned into a cold, hard anger. They thought they had won. They thought they had finally taught me their lesson. But they didn't know the most important thing about Max. He wasn't just a stray dog. He was something much more valuable. And their mistake was about to become the reason for their biggest nightmare. The silence in my apartment was deafening. Every time I opened the door, I expected to see Max wagging his tail. But he wasn't there. My parents had stolen the one thing in my life that wasn't a mistake. They thought they had taught me a lesson about what a proper family looks like. But they didn't know that my life was about to change in a way they could never have predicted. And it was all because of a magazine cover. Part 2. The Search and the Secret. The moment my mom hung up the phone, a cold anger took over my sadness. I wasn't just going to cry. I was going to find Max. I knew my parents had taken him to a local shelter, so I started there. I called every animal shelter, every vet clinic, and every rescue center in the state, describing Max. But there was no record of a dog that matched his description. My parents had lied to the shelter, giving a fake name and saying he was a stray. They had made sure he couldn't be traced back to me. For weeks, I couldn't eat or sleep. I printed hundreds of flyers with Max's photo and put them up on every street corner. I posted his story on social media, begging people to help me find him. Most people were supportive, but there were some comments from trolls who said, "It's just a mutt, get over it," which sounded exactly like my parents. My sister, Jessica, even saw my posts and called me. "Sarah," she said in a fake, sweet voice, "stop making a scene. You're embarrassing Mom and Dad. Just get a new dog." I hung up the phone without saying a word. My parents were so busy congratulating themselves on their genius plan that they didn't see the wave of support I was getting. Max's story went viral. A local news channel did a short segment on a heartbroken woman searching for her missing rescue dog. It was a small glimmer of hope, but it felt like a tiny ray of light in my dark world. But my parents had a secret of their own. For months, they had been trying to buy a huge piece of land to build their dream house. The land belonged to a wealthy and very private man, a former military veteran named Mr. Davies. He had been a hero in his time, but now he was a reclusive old man who just wanted to be left alone. My parents, desperate for the land, had been trying everything to get him to sell it. The problem was Mr. Davies wasn't interested in money. He was an animal lover, and he had made a special condition for the sale of his property. It was all laid out in the contract, but my parents, in their greed, had ignored the fine print. The contract stated that the buyer must be approved by the final decision maker, Mr. Davies' most trusted companion. An animal. It was a strange clause, but one my parents thought they could easily get around with a bribe. They didn't know that Mr. Davies was the CEO of the very rescue organization that Max was once a part of. The revelation. I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. It was a man with a gentle but firm voice. "Are you Sarah?" he asked. "I saw your flyers. I think I found your dog." My heart stopped. He told me that he was a photographer who had found a dog that matched Max's description. He had been looking for a subject for a story on retired service animals, and Max was a perfect fit. He didn't just find Max, he also found out about his past. "Your dog," the man said, "is a hero. He was part of a special program that helped find missing people. His unique markings and his special training, they're one of a kind. He has a microchip that proves it." It turned out Max had been an active service animal before he was retired after an injury. The photographer's story about Max's heroic past went viral. The news picked it up, and suddenly, Max was a celebrity. He was on the local news, then the national news. Everyone was talking about the amazing rescue dog who had been abandoned by his owner's family. A few days later, a famous pet magazine reached out to the photographer and asked to do a cover story on Max. They wanted to celebrate a true hero. My parents, of course, saw the news. They were sitting at home watching TV when a news report came on about a missing rescue dog named Max. They saw his picture, and their faces went pale. "Sarah's dog," my mom whispered. But he's just a stray. Why is he on the news?" My dad, in his panic, started to remember the clause in the contract. The one about the final decision maker. The one about the animal lover. He started to realize their mistake. They didn't just abandon a dog, they abandoned a hero. They had thrown away their daughter's happiness for a piece of land, and in doing so, they had thrown away their own future. They had to find Max, not because they loved him, but because they needed him. But it was too late. I was already one step ahead of them. My parents thought they had won when they kicked Max out of my life. But their mistake was believing that he was just a stray. What they didn't know was that their greed was about to cost them everything, and my little dog was about to become the hero of his own story. The final part is about how I found my revenge, and more importantly, how I found peace. The price of a mistake. The news of Max went viral. He was on every channel, every magazine cover, and everyone was calling him a hero. The photographer who found him gave him a hero's welcome, and the owner of his old rescue program, Mr. Davies, was the first to arrive. He was an old man with a gentle smile, and he had been looking for Max for a long time. My parents and my sister, Jessica, were watching the news from home. My dad, in his greed, saw Max and only saw a way to get his hands on the land. He called my mom and my sister to come over. They were all panicked, desperate to find Max before anyone else. "We have to find him," he yelled. "We have to get him back. He's the key to the land." They didn't even mention me. All they cared about was the contract. I knew exactly what they were doing, so I called Mr. Davies and arranged to meet him at his estate. My parents were already there, begging to see him. They tried to tell him that they had been the ones looking for Max, that they loved him, and that he was their dog. It was a disgusting performance. I walked up to the gate, and my parents' faces went pale. "Sarah," my mom said, her voice shaking. "You found him. We were so worried." My dad tried to hug me, but I stepped away. "I didn't find him," I said. "He found me. Just like he found the missing child he rescued last year." The color drained from their faces. They had no idea about Max's past. They only saw a stray dog. Mr. Davies walked up to us, and my dad immediately started talking to him. "Sir," he said, "this dog is our daughter's, and we've been looking for him for months. We're so glad you found him." My mom and Jessica stood behind him, trying to look concerned, but I could see the greed in their eyes. That's when I looked at Mr. Davies and told him everything. I told him how my parents had called Max a mistake and abandoned him at the shelter. I told him how they had lied to get him and how they only wanted him now because of the land. Mr. Davies listened to every word. When I finished, he looked at my parents and said, "I have to tell you something, Mr. and Mrs. Smith. The sale of this land requires the blessing of my most trusted companion. And that companion is Max." My parents' faces went white. They had ignored the fine print, and their greed had completely blinded them. "We just wanted our daughter to have a good life," my dad said, but it was a lie. He only wanted the land. Mr. Davies looked at me and said, "Sarah, your parents abandoned a dog that was worth more than their entire family. They made a grave mistake." I looked at my parents, and for the first time in my life, I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, just peace. I had won, not just the land, but my freedom. I turned to Mr. Davies and said, "I don't need the land. I just wanted my dog back, and I want to get justice for him." Mr. Davies smiled and said, "The land is not for sale anymore. And as for Max, he has already found a new family. He found me. My parents lost everything. They lost the land, they lost their daughter, and they were left with nothing but their shame. My parents said my dog was a mistake, but they were wrong. He was a hero, and his loyalty was worth more than 1,000,000 acres of land. I learned that you don't need the approval of your family to find happiness. You just need to have a good heart. Have you ever had to choose between your blood family and your chosen family? What did you learn? Share your stories in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to hear more real-life lessons. Thank you for listening.